Soo-ah stared at the wedding dress hanging in her sister's closet, its pristine white silk seeming to mock her desperate situation. 3 days ago, her older sister Ji-hye had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a note saying she couldn't go through with the wedding was tomorrow. The groom, CEO Kang Min-jun, lay unconscious in Seoul National Hospital after a devastating car accident 2 weeks prior. The doctors said he might never wake up, but the marriage contract remained legally binding and financially crucial for both families. Soo-ah's father paced the living room of their modest apartment, his face gray with worry. The Lee family business was drowning in debt, and this marriage alliance was their only lifeline. Min-jun's family needed the union to secure their company's merger, and they had made it clear there would be a wedding tomorrow, with or without Ji-hye. "Soo-ah," her mother said quietly, not meeting her daughter's eyes, "you know what we have to ask of you." At 22, Soo-ah was 3 years younger than Ji-hye, but they shared enough physical resemblance that the deception might work. She was quieter, more studious, content to live in her sister's shadow. But now that shadow had disappeared, leaving her to face an impossible choice. "The Kang family doesn't know Ji-hye well," her father explained, his voice heavy with shame. "The engagement was arranged through intermediaries. If you wear the veil, if you keep quiet during the ceremony, you want me to marry a stranger," Soo-ah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man in a coma. You want our family to survive," her mother replied sharply. "This marriage will save us all." Soo-ah looked at the wedding dress again, imagining herself walking down the aisle toward a man who couldn't even see her. It felt like stepping into a tomb rather than a new life. But her family's desperate faces told her she had no choice. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Kang Min-jun and pray that her unconscious husband would never wake up to discover the deception. Chapter 2. The Wedding Day. The wedding ceremony took place in the hospital chapel, a small sterile room that felt more like a funeral parlor than a place of celebration. Soo-ah stood at the altar in Ji-hye's dress, which was slightly too long and too loose, her face hidden behind layers of white lace. Min-jun's family had arranged for him to be brought down in his hospital bed, still connected to various monitors and IV lines. He looked peaceful in his unconsciousness, his handsome features relaxed, dark hair falling across his forehead. Soo-ah had never seen him before this moment, but she could understand why Ji-hye had been chosen for. The officiant spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid to wake the groom. The ceremony was surreal, vows spoken to an unresponsive man, rings placed on fingers that couldn't feel them, a kiss that landed on lips that couldn't kiss back. "Do you, Lee Ji-hye, take Kang Min-jun to be your lawfully wedded husband, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" Soo-ah's voice caught in her throat. She was promising to love and honor a man she'd never spoken to, using her sister's name, in front of families who had no idea they were witnessing a fraud. "I do," she whispered, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. When it came time for the groom's vows, his mother spoke for him, her voice breaking with emotion. "Min-jun want to say yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He would want to promise to love and protect his bride." The ring slid onto Soo-ah's finger, a massive diamond that felt like a shackle. She was now legally married to a stranger, bound by contracts and family obligations to a life she had never chosen. As the small gathering dispersed, Soo-ah remained by Min-jun's bedside. The nurses had moved him back to his private room, and she was expected to stay with him as his wife. She looked down at the man who was now her husband, wondering if she would spend the rest of her life talking to someone who would never answer back. But at least, she thought, he would never discover her deception. Chapter 3. The First Night. The private hospital room had been decorated with flowers from well-wishers, transforming the clinical space into something resembling a bridal suite. Soo-ah sat in the chair beside Min-jun's bed, still wearing her wedding dress, unsure what she was supposed to do now. The nurses had explained his condition in gentle terms. The car accident had caused severe brain trauma, and while his body was healing, his mind remained locked away. Some patients woke up after days, others after months. Some never woke up at all. "You can talk to him," the head nurse had suggested kindly. "Many families find it helps. Sometimes patients can hear more than we realize." But what could Soo-ah say to this stranger? How could she explain that she wasn't the woman he had agreed to marry? That she was living a lie that grew larger with each passing moment? She studied his face in the dim light of the room. Min-jun was undeniably handsome. Strong jawline, thick eyebrows, lips that looked like they might be quick to smile under different circumstances. His hands, resting on top of the blanket, were long-fingered and elegant, the hands of someone who had never done manual labor. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible over the soft beeping of the monitors. "I'm sorry you're stuck with me instead of her. I'm sorry your family doesn't know the truth. I'm sorry for all of this." She reached out tentatively and touched his hand, surprised by how warm it felt. His skin was soft, well cared for, so different from her father's work-roughened hands. "I promise I'll take care of you," she said, meaning it despite the circumstances. "I don't know how to be a wife, especially not to someone I've never met, but I'll try to do right by you." As she spoke, she gently squeezed his hand, a gesture of comfort for both of them. And then, impossibly, she felt it, a slight pressure in return. His fingers tightened around hers, just for a moment, before relaxing again. Soo-ah's heart stopped. She stared at their joined hands, wondering if she had imagined it, but the warmth of that brief squeeze lingered, and she knew something had changed. Somewhere in his unconscious mind, Min-jun had heard her. Chapter 4. Signs of Life. The next morning, Soo-ah woke up in the hospital chair, her neck stiff and her wedding dress wrinkled beyond repair. She had dozed off holding Min-jun's hand, and even in sleep, she hadn't let go. Dr. Kim arrived for his morning rounds, checking Min-jun's vitals and reviewing his charts. Soo-ah watched nervously, wondering if she should mention the hand squeeze from the night before. "How was his first night as a married man?" Dr. Kim asked with gentle humor, clearly trying to lighten the mood. I think he squeezed my hand last night," Soo-ah said hesitant. "Is that possible, Dr.?" Kim's expression grew more serious. "Reflexive movements aren't uncommon, but deliberate responses. That could be significant. Has it happened again?" Soo-ah shook her head, feeling foolish. "Maybe I imagined it." "Keep talking to him," Dr. Kim advised. "Physical contact can be very important for coma patients. Your presence might be helping more than you realize." After the doctor left, Soo-ah changed into the simple clothes her mother had brought her. The wedding dress was carefully hung in the small closet, a reminder of the role she was now playing. She spent the day reading to Min-jun from newspapers and magazines, telling him about the weather, the hospital staff, anything to fill the silence. His mother visited in the afternoon, bringing homemade soup and treating Soo-ah with the kindness reserved for a beloved daughter-in-law. "Ji-hye, dear, Mrs. Kang said, using the name that still made Soo-ah flinch. "You don't have to stay here every moment. You should go home. Rest properly." "I want to be here," Soo-ah replied, and realized it was true. Despite the circumstances, she felt a strange sense of responsibility toward this unconscious man who was now her husband. That evening, as visiting hours ended and the hospital grew quiet, Soo-ah took Min-jun's hand again. "I read that you're supposed to be brilliant," she said softly. "Your company's stock price went up just because people believe you'll recover. That's a lot of pressure to wake up to." She felt it again. A definite squeeze. Stronger this time. "You can hear me, can't you?" she whispered, her heart racing. Another squeeze. Unmistakable now. Soo-ah stared at Min-jun's peaceful face, realizing that her unconscious husband was more aware than anyone knew. Chapter 5. Secret Communication. Over the following days, Soo-ah developed a secret language with her comatose husband. 1 squeeze for yes, 2 for no, 3 if he was in pain. The medical staff remained unaware of these communications, seeing only a devoted wife caring for her unconscious spouse. She began to learn about Min-jun through these simple exchanges. He could hear the nurses talking about his condition, understood when his mother cried beside his bed, and was aware of the business meetings his father held in the room, discussing the company's future. "Are you scared?" Soo-ah asked and felt a single firm squeeze. "Me too. I never expected my life to turn out like." She told him about her family's financial troubles, about Ji-hye's disappearance, about her own dreams of becoming a teacher that now seemed impossibly distant. She didn't tell him about the deception. That secret felt too dangerous to share, even in their private moments. Min-jun's responses became more nuanced. He would squeeze her hand when she mentioned certain topics, as if encouraging her to continue. When she talked about books she loved, his grip would linger. When she mentioned missing her old life, his touch would become gentle, almost comforting. "The doctors say you might wake up soon," she told him one afternoon. "Your brain activity has been increasing. They're optimistic." 2 squeezes. "No." Soo-ah frowned. "You don't want to wake up?" 1 squeeze. "Yes." "Why not?" But that was too complex a question for their simple system. She began to understand that Min-jun was choosing to remain unconscious, perhaps afraid of what he would face when he woke up. The pressure of running a company, the expectations of his family, the marriage to a woman he barely knew. It was all waiting for him in the conscious world. "You can't stay asleep forever," she said gently. "People need you." 3 squeezes. "I know it hurts," she whispered, bringing his hand to her cheek. "But you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." That night, as she prepared to sleep in her usual chair, Soo-ah felt Min-jun's hand move in hers. Not a squeeze this time, but his fingers intertwining with hers, holding on as if she were his anchor to the world. For the first time since this ordeal began, she didn't feel like she was living a lie. Whatever was growing between them felt real, even if it existed in the space between consciousness and dreams. Chapter 6. The Awakening. 3 weeks into their strange marriage, Soo-ah arrived at the hospital to find Dr. Kim waiting with an expression of barely contained excitement. His brain activity spiked overnight, the doctor explained. We think he might be close to waking up. It could happen any time now. Soo-ah's stomach dropped. She had grown comfortable in their silent world, where Min-jun knew her voice and touch, but not her face, where she could be herself without the weight of her deception. She spent the day watching him anxiously, noting every flutter of his eyelids, every change in his breathing. His hand squeezes had become less frequent, as if he were using his energy for something else. Are you trying to wake up? She asked that. One squeeze, weak but definite. Are you ready? A long pause, then one squeeze. I'm scared, she admitted. When you wake up, everything will change. His fingers found hers, holding tight. At 3:17 a.m., Soo-ah woke to the sound of movement. Min-jun's head was turning slightly, his breathing pattern different. She pressed the call button for the nurses, her heart pounding. Min-jun, she whispered, can you hear me? His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. For a moment he stared at the ceiling, blinking in confusion. Then his gaze found hers. Soo-ah held her breath, waiting for recognition, for anger. For the moment he would realize she wasn't Ji-hye, but his eyes, dark and intelligent even in his confused state, simply looked at her with curiosity. Who? His voice was barely a whisper, rough from weeks of disuse. I'm your wife, Soo-ah said, the words feeling strange in her mouth now that he could hear them clearly. Wife? He tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. The nurses rushed in, followed quickly by Dr. Kim. In the chaos of medical examinations and excited family members being called, Soo-ah slipped into the background. When the initial excitement died down and Min-jun was stable, Dr. Kim delivered news that changed everything. The accident affected his memory, the doctor explained to the gathered family. He remembers some things clearly, but others are gone. He knows who he is, remembers his childhood, his business training, but the past few years, including his engagement, are mostly blank. Soo-ah stared at the doctor, realizing what this meant. Min-jun didn't remember Ji-hye. He didn't remember agreeing to marry any. As far as he knew, Soo-ah was exactly who she claimed to be, his wife. Chapter 7. New Beginnings. Min-jun's recovery was swift once he woke up. Within days he was sitting up, eating solid food, and asking questions about the weeks he had lost. Soo-ah found herself in the impossible position of helping him piece together a life that included her deception. Tell me about our wedding, he said one after, his voice stronger now. Soo-ah's hands trembled as she showed him the photos his mother had taken. It was small because of your condition, just family. He studied the pictures, his brow furrowed in concentration. I don't remember proposing to you. The doctors said your memory might be patchy, she said. Maybe it will come back. Maybe, he agreed, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Despite his memory loss, Min-jun was remarkably easy to be around. He was intelligent and kind, with a dry sense of humor that emerged as he felt better. He asked about her family, her interests, her dreams, listening with genuine attention. You want to be a teacher? He asked when she mentioned her abandoned plans. I did, before we got married. Why can't you still be a teacher? Marriage doesn't end dreams. Soo-ah stared at him, surprised. In her family, marriage meant sacrifice, especially for women. The idea that her husband might support her ambitions was foreign. Your company needs you, she said instead. Your father has been handling things, but the company will survive a few more weeks, Min-jun said firmly. Right now, I'm more interested in getting to know my wife. The word wife still sent a jolt through Soo-ah every time he said it. She was living in a borrowed life, wearing a borrowed name, but the man looking at her with growing warmth was real. What's your favorite book? He asked suddenly. Pride and Prejudice, she answered without thinking. Mine too, he said, smiling, though I prefer Persuasion, second chances and all that. As the days passed, Soo-ah began to see glimpses of who Min-jun really was beneath the CEO facade. He was thoughtful and observant, quick to laugh, and surprisingly gentle. When nurses struggled with difficult procedures, he thanked them patiently. When his mother fussed over him, he endured it with good humor. And when he looked at Soo-ah, his eyes held a warmth that made her forget, for moments at a time, that their entire relationship was built on a lie. Chapter 8. Growing Closer. 2 weeks after Min-jun woke up, he was discharged from the hospital. Soo-ah found herself moving into his penthouse apartment, a space so luxurious it felt like a museum. Everything was pristine, expensive, and completely impersonal. This doesn't feel like home, Min-jun said, echoing her thoughts as they stood in the marble foyer. Maybe because you've been away, Soo-ah suggested. Maybe because it never was home, he replied thoughtfully. Did we live here together before the accident? Soo-ah's throat tightened. According to the story she was supposed to maintain, they had been engaged but not yet living together. No, we were waiting until after the wedding. So this is as new to you as it is to me, he said, and she nodded gratefully. They spent the next few days exploring the apartment together, and Min-jun seemed as surprised as she was by some of the contents. The art was expensive but cold, the furniture beautiful but uncomfortable. The only personal touches were in his study. Books, photos from college, a few awards from his business achievements. I must have been very focused on work, he observed, looking around the sterile space. Your mother says you were always ambitious. Soo-ah off. And what did you think of that? When we were courting? The question caught her off guard. She thought of Ji-hye, who had been attracted to Min-jun's wealth and status, who had seen the marriage as a step up in the world. I thought you were driven, she said carefully, but I hoped there was more to you than just business. And is there? He asked, moving closer to her. Soo-ah looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. I'm still finding out. That evening, they had dinner together in the apartment's formal dining room. Min-jun had insisted on cooking, claiming he wanted to see if he remembered how. I think I used to cook more, he said, serving her perfectly prepared pasta. This feels familiar. It's delicious, Soo-ah said, meaning it. Tell me about your family, he said I know I met them, but I don't remember much. Soo-ah told him about her parents, carefully editing the story to remove the desperation and debt. She described her father's small business, her mother's garden, the modest apartment where she had grown up. It sounds warm, Min-jun said, like a real home. It was, she agreed, then realized she was speaking in past tense. It is. We should visit them soon, he said. I'd like to get to know them again. The thought of Min-jun meeting her parents, of maintaining the deception in front of people who knew the truth, made Soo-ah's stomach clench with anxiety. But when she looked at her husband, and he was her husband, legally if not honestly, she saw only genuine interest in becoming part of her family. The lie was becoming more complicated every day. Chapter 9. Dangerous Territory. As Min-jun grew stronger, he began asking more questions about their relationship. He wanted to know how they met, when he proposed, what their wedding day had been. Each question was a minefield for Soo-ah, who had to construct answers from fragments of truth and careful omissions. I feel like I'm missing something important, he said one evening as they sat on the apartment's terrace, looking out at the Seoul skyline. When I look at you, I feel familiar, but I can't remember falling in love with you. Soo-ah's heart ached at the confusion in his voice. The doctor said some memories might never come back. But shouldn't I feel it? Shouldn't I remember loving you? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Soo-ah couldn't tell him he had never loved her, that he had barely known Ji-hye, that their marriage was a business arrangement he had agreed to in a different... Maybe, she said carefully, you need to fall in love with me again. Min-jun turned to look at her, his expression serious. Is that what you want? To start over? I think, Soo-ah said, choosing her words carefully, that we both deserve a chance to choose each other. Really choose, not just accept what others planned for us. You're very wise for someone so young, he said, reaching for her hand. When their fingers intertwined, Soo-ah remembered those first secret communications in the hospital. The connection they had built in silence was still there, growing stronger each day. Min-jun, she said suddenly, what if you discovered that everything you thought you knew about us was wrong? What if our whole relationship was built on something false? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Are you trying to tell me something? Soo-ah's courage failed her. I'm just saying that sometimes the truth is more complicated than it appears. Then we'll figure out the truth together, he said simply. Whatever it is, we'll face it. His faith in their ability to overcome anything made Soo-ah feel even worse about her deception. Every day that passed made it harder to imagine telling him the truth, and harder to imagine living with the lie. That night, as they said goodnight outside their separate bedrooms, Min-jun had insisted she take the master suite while he recovered in the guest room. He paused at his door, Soo-ah, and her heart stopped. He had never called her by her real name. What did you say? I said goodnight, he replied, but his eyes were thoughtful. As Soo-ah lay in bed that night, she wondered if his memories were returning, or if he was simply more observant than she had realized. Either way, she was running out of time. Chapter 10. The Investigation. Min-jun had always been methodical, and his approach to recovering his memories was no different. He began keeping a journal, writing down fragments of recollection, and trying to piece together the missing months of his life. Soo-ah discovered this when she found the notebook on his desk, left open to a page that made her blood run cold. Inconsistencies, he had written at the top. Below that, a list. Wife, seems nervous when discussing our past. No photos of us together before wedding. Her family's financial situation doesn't match engagement timeline. She flinches when called Ji-hye, knows things about me that a recent acquaintance shouldn't know. Soo-ah stared at the page, realizing that Min-jun had been watching her as carefully as she had been watching him. Her hands shook as she read his observations, each one a nail in the coffin of her deception. At the bottom of the page, he had written, "Who is she really? Find something interesting?" Soo-ah spun around to find Min-jun standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I was looking for a pen," she stammered. "In my private journal? There was no point in lying any. You know, don't you?" Min-jun entered the room and closed the door behind him. "I know that you're not the woman I agreed to marry. I know that you've been lying to me since the day I woke up. What I don't know is why." Soo-ah sank into a chair, the weight of the deception finally crushing her. "My sister ran away 3 days before the wedding. My family, we would have lost everything if the marriage didn't happen. So they sent you instead." "I volunteered," she said quietly. "I couldn't let my parents lose their home, their business, and you were in a coma. I thought you'd never know." Min-jun was silent for a long moment, processing this information. "What's your real name?" "Lee Soo-ah. Ji-hye is my older sister." "Soo-ah," he repeated, and the way he said it made her look up. There was no anger in his voice, only a strange kind of relief. "You're not furious?" "I'm furious," he said, but his tone was calm. "I'm furious that your family put you in this position. I'm furious that my family cared more about a contract than about what I wanted. I'm furious that we've both been trapped in other people's plans. But not furious at me?" Min-jun sat down across from her, his eyes serious. "Soo-ah, for the past month I've been falling in love with a woman I thought I couldn't remember. Now I discover that I never knew her at all. But I know you, the real you, and I'm still falling." Soo-ah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "The question is," he continued, "what do we do now?" Chapter 11. The Choice. The truth hung between them like a bridge they could either cross together or watch burn. Soo-ah sat in Min-jun's study, her real name finally spoken aloud, waiting for him to decide their fate. "We could get the marriage annulled," Min-jun said thoughtfully. "Fraud, deception, there are grounds." Soo-ah nodded, her heart breaking. "I understand. I never expected you to honor a contract you didn't really agree to." "That's not what I'm saying," he said quickly. "I'm saying we have choices now, real choices, not ones made for us by other people." He stood and began pacing, his business mind clearly working through the possibilities. "Your family's debt. How much?" "Min-jun, you don't have to." "How much, Soo-ah?" She told him the figure, watching his expression. It was a fortune to her family, but she could see it barely registered to him. "That's easily handled," he said dismissively. "Your family's financial security doesn't have to depend on this marriage." "Then why would you want to stay married to me?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Min-jun stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "Because in the past month, you've shown me what it feels like to be seen for who I really am, not what I own or what I can provide. You've made me laugh, made me think, made me want to be better than I was. But I lied to you. You protected your family and tried to honor a commitment that wasn't yours to make. There's a difference." He sat down beside her, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." Soo-ah nodded. "If there were no financial pressures, no family obligations, no contracts or expectations, would you want to be married to me?" The question she had been afraid to ask herself hung in the air. Soo-ah thought about the past month, about the man she had come to know. His kindness, his intelligence, his unexpected gentleness, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams, the way he made her feel valued and heard. "Yes," she whispered. "But Min-jun, you don't really know me. You know a month of conversations and shared meals. You don't know if we're compatible long-term, if we want the same things. Then let's find out," he said simply. "Let's start over. Really start over, with honesty this time." He stood and extended his hand to her. "Lee Soo-ah, would you like to go on a date with me?" Despite everything, she laughed. "We're already married. Details," he said with a grin. "We can work backwards. Date, fall in love, then stay married. It's unconventional, but so are we." Soo-ah looked at his outstretched hand, thinking about the choice he was offering. Not the choice her family had made, not the choice circumstances had forced, but a real choice made freely by two people who were finally being honest with each other. She took his hand. "I'd love to go on a date with you, Kang Min-jun." Chapter 12. New Beginnings. 6 months later, Soo-ah stood in the same hospital chapel where she had first married Min-jun, but this time everything was different. She wore a dress she had chosen herself, simple and elegant, and the man waiting for her at the altar was fully conscious and smiling. Their first date had led to dozens more. They had explored Seoul together like tourists, discovering shared interests and gentle differences. Min-jun had supported her return to university to finish her teaching degree, while she had helped him find balance between his business responsibilities and personal happiness. The truth about their unconventional beginning had eventually come out to both families. Min-jun's parents had been shocked but ultimately accepting, especially when they saw how happy their son was. Soo-ah's parents had been mortified by the deception, but grateful for Min-jun's generosity in resolving their financial crisis. Ji-hye had eventually contacted them from Canada, where she had fled to avoid the marriage. She was working as a photographer and had fallen in love with a kind man who knew nothing about corporate mergers or family obligations. Her apology letter had been sincere, and Soo-ah had forgiven her sister, understanding better than anyone the pressure that had driven her to run. "Are you ready?" Min-jun asked as they stood together at the altar, their hands joined. "To marry you for real this time?" "Absolutely." The officiant smiled at their obvious happiness. "Do you, Lee Soo-ah, take Kang Min-jun to be your husband, chosen freely and with full knowledge of who he is?" "I do," Soo-ah said, meaning it completely this time. "And do you, Kang Min-jun, take Lee Soo-ah to be your wife, chosen freely and with full knowledge of who she is?" "I do," Min-jun replied, his voice strong and certain. When they kissed this time, both of them were awake, both of them were choosing, and both of them were exactly who they claimed to be. Later, at the small reception, Min-jun's best man made a toast that made everyone laugh. To Min-jun and Soo-ah, who proved that sometimes the best relationships start with the worst circumstances. As they danced their first dance as a truly married couple, Soo-ah thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with deception and desperation, but it had led to something real and beautiful. "Any regrets?" Min-jun asked as he spun her around. "Only that it took us so long to be honest with. We had to learn to trust, both ourselves and each other. And now we have the rest of our lives to keep learning." As the music played and their families celebrated around them, Soo-ah realized that sometimes the most unexpected paths led to the most extraordinary destination. She had entered a marriage as a substitute, a placeholder for someone else's life, but she was leaving it as herself, chosen and choosing, loved and loving in return. The hand that had first squeezed hers in a hospital bed now wore a wedding ring that matched her own, and the man who had awakened from a coma had helped her awaken to possibilities she had never imagined. Sometimes, Soo-ah thought as Min-jun pulled her closer, the most beautiful love stories began with the most impossible circumstances. Thank you for listening to this story of unexpected love, second chances, and the courage to choose your own destiny. Please write in the comments which country you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible K-drama inspired stories of love overcoming all obstacles.